when a train comes, they want to be able to put the coal in the train. That's the big thing they want. So this is an older facility where they have a bunch of conveyor belts. And you can see in the control room, he's controlling all these conveyor belts. So they're running coal up into this storage silo, and then here's the place where the trains are. And it's a pretty good size. The belts run about 30-35 degrees from the horizontal. If you get them any steeper than that, then you have to have another belt on top, because otherwise the coal slides backwards. But you can see they run these conveyor belts, and they have a storage facility that runs over to where the train is. And here you can see they're loading a unit train. And so it's a big operation, and there's all these mines up and down. Montana's got going, but once the Burlington Northern built this line, all the mines in Wyoming this is the area it's called the Powder River Basin, and it's huge. The two seams come together. They're separate in Montana, the Rosebud and the McKay seam, and they come together in Wyoming, and they're separated by about ½ an inch of ash. It's the goofiest thing. So Burlington Northern, as we talked about before, built this 100 and some mile line, and the Northwestern and now UP owns part of it too. But here's where all the mines are, right here, and they move a lot of coal. And so back to where it was. So they get it over there. Then they from the view from up top. Here comes the conveyor from the mine area, and then they load it into this conveyor, and then it comes up top, and so we were standing up here, and then you see the track where they load the coal, and then they have a spare track if they have some bad cars or an extra train or something shows up. But they want to be able to each of these silos holds one train, so they usually have 2 or 3 silos, because sometimes they'll do one unit train right after another. So that's how they get the coal out of the ground and put it in the unit train. So next month we will go through coal trains. We'll talk about how they developed and what they look like today, and we'll talk about the future of coal, which is down some, and it's going to be going down. But we will be using it for some time, because we have a lot of power plants, and some people want us to continue to burn fossil fuels. Others want to put in more wind and wind and solar. But anyway, coal will be drifting down. But they do move a lot out of Wyoming and Montana. So any questions?
Sure. Well, since some of the coal is dusty, is it ever shipped covered one way or another?
Yes, they haven't had to do these because the railroads have gotten pretty efficient. Once these trains start moving, they also spray a surfactant, kind of a dust cover on the top of the car that kind of holds the dust down. But the stuff that they burn in Ortonville that used to be on the Milwaukee Road, now it's on the BN's doing it. But that stuff is so dusty they have to have covers on top of the car, because they found that they'd lose just going from one end of North Dakota or across South Dakota, they could lose 10% of the coal, which didn't make the neighbors very happy. So so they learned how to contain it, and it's and also they're very careful not to break it up too much. But that's a good question. It's they have to spray this stuff because it is dusty, and it also burns on the pile, as the operators at the power plant used to say. Yeah, it'll burn everywhere but in the boiler. So it has calcium in it. So if it gets wet, the calcium, of course, mixes with water and makes a hot reaction, exothermic reaction, and they'll start on fire. And then put water on it, it gets worse. They learned that pretty quickly. So what they have to do is they have to have scrapers and bulldozers, and they just constantly go over there, and then you bury the coal and run the bulldozer over it a few times. But it's been a challenge, but it's very low cost. I mean, they can afford to ship it to they ship it to Florida and Texas and the East Coast, and you know, that's and the railroads have gotten very efficient at it too. So yeah, it's quite a process, but it's waning as our climate changes a little bit. So
Ross, when do you think we'll go back to fission?
well,
Or will we?
they're looking at small power plants. They think
Yeah,
there's kind of an opposite economies of scale. So they're looking at building some small power plants, small nuclear power plants, kind of modular ones. But yeah, they are, because it generates like I think the guy at Northern States Power said it, like the Monticello nuclear plant up in Monticello generates about 2% of the carbon that is an equivalent coal unit would. And that is to process the uranium, and then also the any extra handling that you have to do. The employees coming and going to and from work, I mean, that's the same thing. You're gonna have that no matter what you do. But it's about 2%, 1 to 2%, 2.5%, depending on the process. And that's, you know, 40 to 50 times better. So all of a sudden the environmentalists, remember Germany was going to shut all the nuclear plants down, and then all of a sudden, gee, maybe we shouldn't. So, and Ontario was
if you're
too.
gonna do a lot of electric cars, you're gonna burn a lot of electricity. You gotta
Well,
get
that's
it from
right. And
someplace.
if you now all of a sudden everybody wants to electrify the economy, because it's if you, especially if you got wind and solar, hey, let's electrify everything. So
Now, I didn't realize that most nuclear power plants in America, at least, are all different.
yeah.
There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of commonality. I think in Europe they went the opposite direction. They did do a bunch of commonality.
Yeah, the French
everywhere,
were
but-
really big on that stand. They were good on standardization.
Yeah,
They
the
came,
French had a standard design, yeah.
they
can't hear
came
you,
up with
Craig.
the SNUPS project, you know, which is standard nuclear power plant system. Something SNUPS was a big thing, and they were pushing it in the 80s. But unfortunately, by that time, the costs just had ballooned. You know, I mean, if you remember another acronym, WHOOPS, which is the Western
Washington Public Power System.
Thank you. You're good. Anyway, they were going to build 5 nuclear plants, and they contracted for all of them at once, $25 billion. Well, and you don't just build one at a time, you know. But anyway, the costs got out of control. They weren't well managed, and but the plants that are out there and that are running, I mean, Northern States Power wants to, Xcel Energy wants to extend the life again, and they're into territory nobody, you know, the things were supposed to last 30 years, and Monticello has been running since 1976, I think it is. So it's coming up on what, 50 years, and it's running great. They're very good, and 2% of the carbon of a coal plant. Can't beat that.